civility, cultural awareness, diversity, understanding. These are all really, really important terms for a globalized community. For a community that has to interact, has to work collaboratively, has to be part of the solution, for all of us to be engaged in having fulfilled lives. At EIU, and myself, and my administration, we feel that we're champions for the cause of respect and inclusion. We believe in it. We know the importance of it. Yet today, it still remains one of the most difficult and serious challenges in our world. Right down to our families, our classrooms, and all the way up to international relations, international business, the economy, geopolitical discussions, and dialogue. It seems like something that would be so easy. You know, as an anthropologist, I was always trained in cultural relativism. You know, understand people in how they understand their world. Appreciate people for how they understand their world, and embrace the idea that we're not all the same, that we're different, and that we may have different ideas, different beliefs, different looks, different styles, different behaviors, different cultural attitudes, that we all are part of the humankind and the human condition. It is that important that we have just dialogues and conversations and discussions about what happens when this breaks down. The idea of cyberbullying, bullying face-to-face, disrespect for others, incivility, misunderstanding, disunderstanding. These are all challenges that negatively impact the ability to have a successful and fulfilled life which engages and embraces the diversity of humankind. It is amazing to me that in 2015, we still live in a world where there is uncivility or incivility and disrespect for others. And it can happen at any age and at any time, and it doesn't need to. This is not an innate behavior, it's a learned behavior. And we need to work collectively. We need to work in our academies. We need to work in our families. We need to work at our K through 12 schools in bringing an attitude and a sense of individuality and collective cooperation. And that's my message, and something that I truly believe in, and something that I will carry forward in the great institution of Eastern Illinois University. We have a lot of visitors to campus today. I don't know if any of you are here on our campus for the first time. If you are, I welcome you. It is a beautiful campus with a wonderful culture and a wonderful tradition at Eastern Illinois University. For those of you who are visiting but you've been here before, well, take a look around, walk around, see our students, talk to them. It is really a great culture. And for those of you who are students and faculty and administrators, you know all about the Eastern tradition. You make it happen, and thank you for what you do. Well, this morning we have a great treat, and that's our keynote speaker for our bullying conference today. And our speaker is Mrs. Melissa Schlinger. She's Vice President of Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Not an easy title. It's easier to just say CASEL, and that's what I'll do. Ms. Schlinger leads and oversees CASEL's efforts to advance systematic implementation of evidence-based social and emotional learning in school districts across the nation. So I know that she's going to be able to provide a perspective that may be Illinois-like, may be Midwest-like, and may be national-like, so that we can see not only what is taking place and the challenges that we have here, but the challenges that exist throughout our great nation. She also oversees the development of resources and practical tools to help educators in their mission to help students reach their academic and personal potential. And nobody can reach their potential if they are kept back by discrimination or bullying. and I will tell you that is a fact. Throughout her career, Melissa has been dedicated to serving the needs of kids as a teacher, an advocate, a provider of professional development, a collaborator with school districts, universities, and state departments, and also as a mentor, and as I understand now, a mother of twins that will be 8 years old in Monday, So I don't think the twins are here today, so they're probably in your heart and your mind, but for about the next hour, I know that Mrs. Schlinger is going to be an unbelievable advocate and spokesperson for the need of tolerance, the need of civility, and the importance of it across our nation. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce to you our speaker for today, our keynote speaker, Mrs. Melissa Schlinger.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me. I am really thrilled to be down here. I'm here from Chicago and had a really nice, easy drive down here. And really excited to be on your beautiful campus and to be talking to you today about this important mission. You did just hear a little bit about who I am and that I'm from CASTLE, which again is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And because of our work at CASTLE and our focus on social and emotional learning, bullying prevention is clearly an area that we care a lot about. And as a former 5th and 6th grade teacher myself, it is something I've witnessed firsthand. And as a mother of almost 8-year-old twins, it's something that I care a lot about personally as well. I think about it actually all the time as a mother, and I ask them questions every day about how their day was at school. Who did you sit by on the bus? What happened at recess? And I look for signs, and I look for clues, because it's important to all of us. Despite my professional career, which has led me here today, and my personal interest in this topic, I think it's also important to tell you a little bit about who I am not. I am not a bullying expert. I don't travel around the country talking about bullying. I cannot tell you all the best strategies for preventing bullying. What I am going to talk to you today about is social and emotional learning and its relationship to bullying. Before I do that, though, I'd like to know a little bit about who you are. So if you could just tell me by show of hands, how many of you are students here at this school? Wow, okay, great. How many of you are teachers? Okay, principals? Great. How about central office people? Anybody from the university? Okay. How many of you are parents of school-age children? Okay. So obviously bullying is important to all of us, and maybe for different reasons. I'd like you to just turn to the person next to you and think about a couple of questions. And if you're a student at this school, I want you to sort of imagine, if you will, since let me see, how do I advance this? Here we go. These next questions. So let's talk a little bit about these 3 things. Is there a bullying prevention program in your school? What are some other programs that you had in your school? And you can even think back to when you were in high school, if that's helpful. And what concerns do you have about the sustainability of your bullying prevention program in your school? So just take a minute to chat with your neighbor about these questions. And then we're going to talk a little bit about them. I hear a lot of good conversations. I'm wondering if there's any brave souls who will share your conversation or share some of your thoughts about whether or not you had a program or concerns you may have about the sustainability of bullying programs in your schools. Anyone? Yeah.
Well, we were just talking, we can't remember if we had a good one or had one at all. If we did, it didn't make much of a difference. Danny here said that they had called the Magic Dragon in her junior high, and that no one took it seriously. So, what we had obviously wasn't working very well. If we had it, so we're not sure.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'm from Indiana originally, and when I was in middle school, they established the HERO program. And although it had a good image in the beginning, it was kind of contradictory because it was a student-based voting process, so the popular ones got involved, and they kind of did their thing. And for the most part, the popular kids were the ones that were actually causing the emotional disturbances. So it kind of counteracted it. But over the years, as I entered my final years of high school, it got better. And then from what I've been hearing from my teachers now that I still keep in contact with from high school, it got a lot better. So it's been improving steadily.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Others? Yeah.
I have my 6th grade daughter with me today, and she was saying that they're really, because I wasn't really sure, like, do you guys talk about it, even if there's not a program, there's no really formalized program. And she said they don't talk about it, it's just more like bullying is bad, they don't have any discussions about it.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. So lots of different experiences with bullying prevention programs. And I will tell you, when I go around the country, I do have an opportunity to visit a lot of schools. And one thing that strikes me when I walk into a school, like a middle school or a high school in particular, is you actually see evidence of lots of different programs kind of on the walls and the posters. There's maybe this big banner, No Place for Hate, for their bullying program. They've got a character education program. There may be a substance abuse prevention program that the nurse is leading, a dropout prevention program, a graduation coach, programs for violence prevention, you name it. There's lots and lots of programs. And all of these programs are often very well intentioned, they're often effective, but what we start to see is the more and more of them that we have, we see teachers and educators experiencing what we call initiative fatigue, right? Because every time a new program comes, it usually comes because of some big event, some horrible tragedy or something happened and there's this explosion of energy around this particular topic. And there may be a parent who's a champion or a teacher or a principal or a district leader or even someone in Congress, and it gets all this energy and all this attention, and then over the years it tends to wane as it makes room for now the next program. And so we've got all these programs kind of coming and going, and they tend to be disjointed. We have all these things that we're trying to prevent kids from doing, all these prevent this bad thing, prevent that bad thing. But what we know actually is that these things that we're trying to prevent, all of these behaviors and sort of negative situations are very complex. And one targeted program to address this complex behavior often can't really be effective because it needs to be sustained sometimes for 5 or 10 years. And you have a lot of disjointed programs. Now, one thing that we know about schools is that schools are not intervention centers. They're not treatment facilities. Schools are supposed to be there to promote the optimal development of kids. And so instead of taking an approach of, let's intervene, let's prevent this bad thing, let's prevent this bad thing, what we really wanted to start thinking about is how do we, instead of preventing everything, how do we promote the good? What we know is that our best defense against the bad is the promotion of the good. And schools actually are, in fact, well equipped to promote the good. That's what we do. We are designed to promote academic achievement. At Castle, we really feel strongly that schools should also be the place to promote the social and emotional development of students so that we don't have to constantly be preventing all of the bad. And if we focus our energy on actually promoting the good, we will have a much reduced incidence of all of these types of behaviors. So let me tell you a little bit about Castle. How many of you are familiar with Castle or you've heard of it before? Okay, a few. Now, CASEL stands for, again, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Our mission is to help all schools in the United States, in K-12, make social and emotional learning a critical part of all kids' education. We do that in 3 ways. We have a group of folks at CASEL who are focused on policy efforts. Their jobs are to really work in Washington to help senators and House members and legislators think about policy efforts that could allow for funding and prioritization of social and emotional learning as part of education. We also work with state departments of education on developing state standards around SEL. And in fact, Illinois was the first state in the United States to develop its own freestanding K-12 SEL learning standards. We also have a pretty large group of researchers. Many of you may know Dr. Roger Weisberg, who leads up the team. He's our Chief Knowledge Officer. These researchers are building the field by conducting research, summarizing research, and promoting the research on social and emotional development, which I'm going to share with you a little bit about later. And then the third group, which is where I'm involved, is the practice. For a long time, CASEL was focused only on policy and research until they started realizing we can't really make change if we're not really doing this and testing this out in our school districts. So we actually work very closely with 9 urban school districts around the country to promote the systemic development of social and emotional learning. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. So what is social and emotional learning? Just so that we're all on the same page, we hear lots of terms that people talk about. We hear character education, grit is a really popular one right now, mindsets, all these different types of thinking about what we're doing here. But we think of social and emotional learning as the umbrella for all of those things. And this is the process through which both children and adults too, by the way, recognize and manage their emotions, demonstrate care and concern for others, develop positive relationships, make good decisions, and behave ethically, respectfully, and responsibly. You may have seen this wheel before. I've actually already seen this several times just walking through your hall. The wheel of social and emotional learning that CASEL published about 20 years ago now. The first category on this wheel is self-awareness. And when we think about self-awareness, there are some key strategies that we think about here. So here we're talking about, can you even identify the emotions that you're having? And do you have a language for those emotions? Do you know the difference between when you're feeling angry or frustrated or resentful? Also understanding where you have your own strengths, where you have challenges with certain things. What is your sense of confidence and self-efficacy? Do you actually believe you're in control of your own destiny? All of these things are part of your self-awareness. We all probably know adults who lack self-awareness. This is a critical competency that we're always building. Now, it's a really important piece for this next one too, which is self-management. And here we're talking about, here we talked about already the emotions that we have. Can you manage those emotions? Can you control your impulses? Can you manage your stress? Are you able to be resilient in the face of difficulties? Are you able to stay motivated? Are you able to set goals for yourself and actually work towards achieving those goals? And can you keep yourself organized to do that? The self-awareness and self-management skills are critically important. Now, these next 2 blue areas have to do with others. Okay, so the first 2 have to do with self. Now we're going to talk about others. Social awareness. Are you able to understand the perspective of others, to show empathy for others, to appreciate the diversity of others, and show respect? Obviously, it's important to understand yourself, but if you want to really get along with others, this is a critical piece as well, understanding their emotions. And then what you do with that, your actions here, influence your relationship skills. Are you able to communicate effectively with others? Are you able to engage socially with others in an appropriate way? Building relationships, working cooperatively, resolving conflicts. These are all things that are not only important for school, but obviously critically important for life. And then lastly, we think about putting all of these together so that we can make responsible decisions for ourselves. Can we identify what the problem is and what are the possible solutions and consequences of those solutions? Are we able to reflect on our own behavior and make evaluations and behave ethically in contributing to our own society? These are the 5 core competencies of social and emotional learning. So what does SEL have to do with bullying? I think actually you have a copy of that wheel in your folder. And I wanted to just reflect on this for a minute. What does this have to do with bullying? So if you could think for a minute about these core areas, and on the back of that wheel, which is in your folder, if you want to just flip it out, it has all of those descriptions. You could just look at that for a minute and chat with the person next to you again, and think about bullying for a minute. Think about the perpetrator of bullying, the target of bullying, and the bystanders, and whether or not they intervene. And if you could just take a couple seconds to think about which of these skills are critical or are lacking for the bully, the victim, and the bystander who intervenes or who doesn't intervene. Just take a couple of minutes and talk with your neighbor about these skills and their relationship to bullying. It's on the right side and the back. Okay, and does it have on the back side the skills itself? Okay, great, excellent.
As opposed, sure, because you know, that
good conversations I can hear already, and I'm really interested in your thoughts on this as well. So let's talk for a minute about the student who is likely the perpetrator of bullying. Anybody want to share some thoughts on some skills that they might be lacking, or how it helped to improve those? Yes, back there.
I know that in most cases, or this is believed, that individuals who bully tend to have some type of emotional duress, either at home or inside internally. They may try to bring about emotions in other people that they only know how to do. So if someone is emotionally abused or in some form of abuse at home, they'll try to reciprocate that to another individual to bring out emotions in them because they don't understand how to properly bring out positive things.
Right. So there's clearly some emotional issues often with students who perpetrate bullying, although not always. Interestingly, the research says that sometimes you do have students who have seen for them modeled negative behavior, but sometimes it's actually students who are sort of socially superior who bully. But one thing that we do know is pretty pervasive from the research is that they clearly are not strong at expressing their own emotions. Most kids who bully tend to have issues with anger themselves, and if you interview kids who bully and ask them why, they most often will report that they themselves are having a bad day, they're angry, they're stressed. So you're right, and all these things, if we could promote good emotion management and emotion regulation, hopefully those kids would find different ways to cope with whatever it is they're dealing with at home, which does often tend to influence that. Other thoughts about the bully? Yeah.
Well, I was going to talk about the popular kids who are superior and everyone else isn't.
Right. So that's a student maybe who is kind of socially smart, but what major skill are they lacking? Empathy, right. Empathy, in my view, is one of the most critical social and emotional competencies, and we see evidence of a lack of empathy everywhere, right? And all you have to do is turn on the news, right? All you have to do is see stories about police brutality or see stories about social justice issues that really boil down to empathy often. So empathy is an area that can be taught. In fact, the good news about all of this is that these are things that can be taught. You don't have to be born with strong social and emotional skills or weak ones. You can actually, all of these things can and should be taught. Any other comments about kids who tend to bully? Yeah.
What is the biggest area of concern? Yes, all of them.
Yeah.
There is no overarching, it's a holistic issue, and you can't categorize a specific one. There are bullies in every single area who have different characteristics, maybe dialed up a little more than others, but it'll be all-encompassing. So a program that focuses on one is going to fail at others. So unless it's a holistic approach, there's no way to really be successful.
Right, right. Thank you for your comments. Let's talk a little bit about the kids who tend to get bullied. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I know that in my case, when I was in middle school, all throughout that little general period, it tended to be for me a lack of confidence, no self-assurance. You really had no idea what you were supposed to do when you're around people. You kind of tend to try to shy off, or in some cases, there's something different about you that shines bright, and people notice that and they want to drag you down, so that way you're on their equal level. In some cases, it could be the fact that they want to be higher than you, like was discussed before. It's all a matter of positive. It's all a matter of positive and. Okay, it's all a matter of positive and.
That's okay. I can hear you. I gotcha.
It's all a matter of what really you're doing that brings you to public notice. Because most people, they're trying to find someone, in the bully perspective, they're trying to find someone who they can attach to in some way or another that they can either use to push them forward or to put them in the shine.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Other comments on kids who tend to be the targets of bullies? If you look at the research on kids who are likely targets of bullying, they do tend to, as you say, lack self-confidence, which is also a social emotional competency. They also tend to react more emotionally than other kids. I will tell you, I have, I mentioned almost 8-year-old twins, and my son definitely falls into this category. Much more easily comes to tears, right? And that can be a really dangerous quality in terms of being a target for bullies, because bullies like a reaction, right? So they are more likely to target someone who is going to react with an emotional reaction. And then that just feeds the bully. So emotional regulation is an important skill that I'm working with him on, but that we should be working with all of our kids on. And also this issue of self-confidence and self-efficacy. And sometimes kids who are targets of bullies tend to have difficulty with their own peer interactions. Sometimes they don't they tend to be more withdrawn, they don't have as much confidence for social engagement. All of these things are social and emotional competencies. Let's think for a minute about the bystander, or you may have heard the term upstander. The kid who either does or does not intervene, who's watching by the sidelines. What kinds of competencies or lack of competencies would you want to expect to see there? Thoughts on this? Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a competency exactly, so you can help me out with that. But I think there's a focus on individual achievement and, you know, an individualistic perspective that can make it difficult to be aware of what's going on with other people. Mm-hmm.
So social awareness.
Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, when you ask kids who did intervene what the most common reason that they intervened, it's empathy. I felt bad for that kid. And interestingly, when a student intervenes, bullying incidents tend to stop within 10 seconds. It's very effective if a kid intervenes. Yeah?
I think some with the problem solving because they're afraid of it turning on them.
Right. So in fact, that is one of the reports of why kids don't intervene, for fear of retaliation. Yes. Or why they don't report. And that's also another important competency, which is seeking help. So all of these social and emotional competencies are critical for all different aspects of bullying. And you all have basically just identified what all of the research has said. Now, the interesting thing about research on bullying programs, though, it's a little bit weak. There have not been a lot of rigorous studies done. There was a meta-analysis done that looked at 16 studies. One of the findings that was reported of the meta-analysis was that the programs didn't seem to do any harm, which is kind of not what we're looking for. And only about 1/3 of them had positive effects. So that we still have a lot of work to do in our bullying programs. As I mentioned, I'm not a bullying expert, so I am going to tell you a little bit about the research on social and emotional learning programs, which I have a little more experience with. So there was a meta-analysis also done on SEL programs. And as you all probably know, a meta-analysis is the gold standard of research. It's not just looking at one individual research study. One individual research study can show exactly what you want. It can show great gains or no gains. You can find either one. A meta-analysis, by definition, is required to take every single study that qualifies, both good and bad, and look at them all and code them all as if they were one study. So this meta-analysis, which was groundbreaking in 2011 and was actually conducted by Roger Weisberg and colleagues, looked at 213 studies that were involving school-based universal SEL programs, and the number of students that were involved in these studies is 270,000. These were kids that were not pulled out because they were thought to have emotional issues. This was universal interventions in K-12. And they wanted to look at the impact of programming on 6 areas. The first one was, do these SEL programs have an impact on the SEL skill development? So that one we were pretty hopeful and pretty sure would be the case. In this category we talked about, what they looked at specifically was students' ability to identify emotions, to set goals, to take perspectives, interpersonal problem solving, conflict resolution, and decision making. They also wanted to look at attitudes. So your attitude about yourself and others, self-perception, school bonding, pro-social beliefs about violence, helping, social justice, and drug use. They also want to look at what they called positive social behavior. So this was observed behavior by students, teachers, parents, or others about how well these kids get along with others. They want to look at conduct problems, so reported incidents of disruptive class behavior, non-compliance, aggression, bullying in this case specifically mentioned, suspensions and delinquent acts. Also the incidence of emotional distress, how much depression, anxiety, stress, and social withdrawal. And then lastly, I also wanted to see what was the impact on academic performance, which was perhaps maybe a stretch. The question here is, when you do evidence-based social and emotional programming, what is the impact on these 6 areas? So in these 213 studies, the overall finding was that SEL skills improved by 22%. Attitudes towards self and others improved by 9%. Positive social behavior by 9%. Conduct problems went down by 9%. Emotional distress went down by 10%. And actually, academic performance went up by 11%. Some of the studies it went up by as much as 17%. Why would you imagine that focusing on SEL would lead to academic performance? Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Students will be more confident in themselves and they can achieve.
Right. I mean, and really, when you think about it, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you're not be worried about all this other stuff, then you can actually do what you came to school to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
That, and because whenever you actually have all of the potential damages done, after they're out of the way, you know, it opens up the idea that school isn't such a bad place after all.
Exactly. And you know, don't forget, there are specific skills in here we're talking about, like your perseverance and goal setting and drive and motivation. We know we need all these things to be successful in school. So how do you know what an SEL program is? Castle has published on our website 2 guides to help school districts evaluate what's out there. One for elementary schools that was published in 2013 and one in 2015. So there are specific outcomes that we looked at to have for inclusion in the guide. One was, did the program improve academics? The second was, did it improve positive social behavior? The third was, did it reduce conduct problems, and did it reduce emotional distress? This focus on academic performance is such a critical one because as of right now, schools are not held accountable for how confident their kids are, right? They are not held accountable for how much empathy their kids are showing. They are held accountable for academic performance. So in order to focus on policy, to secure funding, we really do need to look at the impact on academics. And so what you'll see in these guides on the elementary, you can see all the programs that we've reviewed up here on the left side, what grade levels they serve, and what kinds of outcomes were found for that school, for that particular program. The middle and high school version does the same thing. So different programs focus on different things. So for educators who are in the field, this is a great free resource to see what's out there and what kinds of effects are we seeing. So is that all you have to do? You just teach a program and you're done? No, that's not all we have to do. When we think about school-wide SEL at Castle, we're not just talking about teaching these skills. It is a critical component, but it's not all there is to it. In addition to teaching these skills, which we do believe schools should be doing, we also believe you should be embedding this instruction into all different areas of instruction, into English, into social studies, into math. And it's actually not that hard to do, to create lessons where empathy is part of the lesson. And that can be easily done through literature, to create lessons and environments where kids are working together to resolve conflicts or to collaborate with each other. It's incredibly important that SEL not just be for 30 minutes once a week with a second step program, for example, but that it's something that we're doing all the time. And it's not just in the classroom. We also believe that SEL should be integrated into school-wide practices and policies. So for example, what's your discipline policy? I'll give you an example. Sometimes it's hard to tell if SEL is part of a school. When we walk through a school, you want there to be quiet halls, right? That's a good sign that this school has maintained order and it has got people going into their routines. But you could see evidence of quiet halls from two schools that got there in very different ways. One school might be getting there through compliance, rewards, and punishments, right? So you walk down the hall and you talk, you get a detention, right? That is very effective, perhaps, but you're not actually building up skills. You are just teaching kids to be compliant with rules. You could also get there by teaching kids about respect for the classrooms that you're walking by, empathy for the students that are in there, and helping them understand that in order to be in a school where you can focus on your schoolwork when kids are in the hall, you need to be that student in the hall that allows others to focus on theirs. So using empathy and respect is a way to use SEL skills to get the same results, and actually empowers those kids well beyond just that particular role. We also think families and community partnerships are critical too. We want kids to be engaged outside of the school in pro-social behaviors. We want to involve families and CBOs as well. So now let's talk about the adults, right? Because the SEL is not just about the kids. SEL has a lot to do with the way the adults in the building model their own skills and how they treat each other and how they treat kids. So I want you to think for a minute about a teacher that you had that had a significant and positive impact on you in your own education, just for a minute. And if you can, how many of you can instantly think of a teacher? Okay, yeah, I mean, a lot of us who went into education, it was because of that teacher that we are sort of channeling that energy. Anybody want to share with me just about the teacher that came to their mind? Since I don't have too many folks who want to participate, yes.
For me, my Orange teacher in high school, Mr. Foster, he basically attacked every situation with a different type of learning opportunity. He basically divided music not only into just a way of expression, but also a form of mathematics. He went in depth with it. He taught various life skills all throughout the day that all the time we were there. And he showed a very, very positive outlook on pretty much everything.
Okay. Great. So I had a positive outlook on the situations that you were learning about. Anybody else? Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, the teacher that actually immediately comes to mind genuinely showed me that she cared. Like, I felt as if she cared, especially for me. And I'm sure she cared about others too, but I felt she really cared about me. And, you know, I want to do everything to please her. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
I had a 7th grade social studies teacher who was also the basketball coach, and he just actually made history fun. Not to count the fact that he almost accidentally hit me with a part of a broomstick. He didn't mean to, he was just swinging it, demonstrating it, and it just broke apart on him and went right by my head.
Okay, so he made learning fun for you.
He made learning fun for me, and everything was a good act. And actually, after a while, he actually moved to my neighborhood and gave me rides home after school.
Okay, so that second part is actually, to me, as important as the learning is fun. So we all like teachers who make learning fun and who make it engaging. I mean, I wish every teacher were able to make learning fun. But this other piece that you mentioned, and in fact that you mentioned very significantly, is typically what you see as a common thread that goes through stories of teachers that we remember. That we had this perception that this person cared about me individually, right? That you said, I'm sure she cared about other people, but I felt like she cared about me. And sometimes people will talk about, they pulled me aside and told me something special about themselves. It's amazing how important that feeling of individuality and individual care goes with kids. You know, it's funny, my kindergarten, well, they're now in 2nd grade, but when my kids were in kindergarten, at the last day of school, I said to my kids, I bet you're gonna miss your teachers next year. You both had really good teachers. And my son said, yeah. And I said, wow, that didn't sound very convincing. He said, you know what I didn't like about my teacher? I said, what? He said, she never gave me a private compliment. I said, and of course, you know, he doesn't know what I do for a living, so I took note. So what do you mean? He said, I don't know, it was just always, I like how Will and Jenny and Sarah are sitting. She never just pulled me aside and told me something good about myself. And I thought, how interesting that this 6-year-old is picking up on this, because that is exactly the thing that bonds kids to teachers. And then they want to work really hard for those folks. In fact, the research tells us that when kids feel attached to at least one adult, they're less likely to drop out of school. It can help them with their own social support, especially if you're talking about reporting on issues of bullying. Having at least one adult that's there, they're more likely to report. And then lastly, you mentioned this, students work harder for teachers they like, period. And we all know that. And it's actually not just teachers, by the way. When you get out there and you're working, employees work harder for bosses they like, right? People work harder when they feel connected to that person. How do we do that? It has to do with getting to know our students as people and allowing them to get to know you. A lot of times teachers think that if they ask their kids what they did over the weekend, they're bonding with them. Or if they know that, you know, Jerome's on the basketball team, they know something about them. That is not the same thing as developing an actual relationship. You all don't know me at all, but you actually do know a couple of nuggets about me. You know I live in Chicago. You know I have these twins. I could tell you lots of things. Every time I tell you a fact about myself, your head might cock a little bit and you might know a little bit more. My parents got divorced when I was 2. My dad's from Iran and he went back there. I could tell you all these, and all of a sudden you're thinking, huh, you're beginning to see that this is actually a whole human, not just this person talking to us about bullying. There's all these different stories in my life, just like there are in yours. And when we know those little nuggets about our kids, and we share those nuggets with our kids, it really goes a long way for building that relationship. Respecting their individuality and showing that you respect their individuality. Communicating high expectations is also obviously really important. Listening to and looking for cues and paying attention to those quiet kids too. Sometimes it's very easy to focus on the squeaky wheels, but we know that we need to be paying attention to the others as well. And to communicate and foster an atmosphere of caring. I think sometimes teachers think, you know, what happens outside of school really has nothing to do with me. I'm here to teach biology, right? Or, you know, and this is actually one of the things that we're seeing, as you probably know, is a rise in cyberbullying and a resistance on the part of schools to get involved, partially because that has nothing to do with me. That happened outside of school, but it has everything to do with you and everything to do with your classroom. And when I taught 5th grade, I actually had an incident where I got a call from the principal on Monday morning down to the office, and she said, there was an incident with girls in your class over the weekend that I think you should know about. And I'm immediately thinking, what does this have to do with my day today? I've got my whole day planned, and you know, girls will be girls, and this has nothing to do with me. She said, well, you know, you had a relatively new student, Kristen, and apparently Elizabeth had a birthday party over the weekend, or she was supposed to have a birthday party. She invited every girl in the class, but a couple of days ago, she told Kristen that the birthday party was canceled. Her parents were going out of town. So Kristen was disappointed, but oh well. Well, in fact, the birthday party wasn't canceled. Elizabeth had the party, and then at the party, they called Kristen to say, we really just didn't want you here. We're all at the party, right? Horrible. Horrible thing. And, you know, I was horrified, but I, again, was thinking, what am I supposed to do about this? Like, I'm a 5th grade teacher. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with this. And so you need to talk to Elizabeth. I said, okay. And again, no training, I didn't really know what to do, but one thing that I had done well was I had gotten to know my kids pretty well, and I had a pretty good relationship with the students in my class. So I really just sat down with her and just talked to her to say, what happened? What were you thinking? And let's try to imagine what that must have felt like for Kristen. And we talked about it for probably a good 20 to 30 minutes about what it would feel like to be a new student in a new school, to be invited to a birthday, to think you were going, to get this news, to then have this happen. And you could kind of see Elizabeth coming to this conclusion of what actually had happened. I don't think it actually had occurred to her how much pain she had caused. And I also communicated to Elizabeth how disappointed I was, because she was in fact a leader. She was a social leader, she was an academic leader, and that I was counting on her to provide good leadership and to use her powers for good, not evil. And, you know, so the incident kind of passed. Nothing really happened. You don't really know if this is going to happen again, but it certainly weighed on me. But what happened a year later was actually really interesting. Her 6th grade teacher, Elizabeth's, 6th grade was the end of the elementary school, had them doing memoirs of elementary school, and they had to write about these experiences from when they were in school. And Elizabeth had written an entire entry on this particular incident, on our conversation, and on her commitment to what she was going to do afterwards, which was news to me, but really, really rewarding to see, wow, this stuck with her. And I think the reason it stuck with her is because we had that relationship before it happened. So building the relationship is not going to cure anybody of doing anything wrong, but it sure does help to make things right. Let's talk a little bit about the district level, and I know we need to wrap up, and I wanted to show you guys a quick video. Can SEL be systemically implemented at the district level? Is this something that we just do in our classrooms or do in our schools, or is it actually possible to do this at the district level? Castle has a theory of action that was developed with the American Institute for Research that is centered around 10 key activities that we do at the district level. So I'm just going to kind of put these up here. There are 10 things that we believe that districts need to do in order to systemically implement SEL. These first 4 activities about communication and development of a plan and really getting everything together, we think about those as kind of getting your district ready to do the work. So you've got to build your central office capacity, you've got to make sure you've got the money and the people to do the work and get your plan together. The second is, you need to know what you're already doing and what you should be doing. So that's this next one, assessing SEL resources and needs. These next 4 really fall into the bucket of actually doing the work. So you're going to do professional learning, you're going to align with other district initiatives, you're going to develop standards, you're going to actually pick evidence-based programming. And then the last one is, did what you did work? And what can you do to continue to improve? So this is Castle's theory of action of how you would systemically implement SEL throughout a district. And when you do that, it trickles down into the school. So when we work with districts, we focus on this district work, which then impacts the individual schools and their work with students. You recognize that wheel. And when you do that, you get really important short and long-term outcomes, including more connectedness, a sense of purpose, more pro-social behavior, improved academic performance, and so forth. And you also see, in the long term, better readiness for college and career, healthy adult relationships, and so forth. The Collaborating Districts Initiative in Castle is work that we're doing with these 8, actually now 9 school districts: Anchorage, Austin, Cleveland, Chicago, Nashville, Oakland, Sacramento, and Washoe. We just added Atlanta Public Schools to our work. The goal of the CDI is actually a huge, large-scale research project. Working with the American Institutes for Research, we're asking 2 questions. Is this feasible? And what happens when you do it? This first question seems like, maybe it seems obvious to you. Of course it's feasible, but actually when we started this research project, we weren't sure. Because as you all probably know, large urban districts turn over superintendents every couple of years. In fact, CPS, Chicago, 4 in 4 years, okay? Every single one of these districts, all 9 of them, have turned over their superintendent at least once or twice, if not more, in the last 4 years. So is it feasible to do this at a district-wide level? We really weren't sure, and in fact, we thought for sure some would drop out over time. The second one, when you do that, what happens? That's a really important question too. How does it affect student outcomes? We are about 4 years in. The results are really positive. The first question is yes, it's feasible. We're seeing all 8 districts in the CDI are making forward momentum on their SEL district-wide implementations. And we're also seeing that those schools that have the furthest progressed implementations of their SEL have improved academics, improved attendance, and better behavior. So far so good. We're only 4 years in, and we believe this is a 5 to 10 year study. We're 4 years in, the early signs are positive. Now, it's not perfect, Anybody who has spent any time in a large urban district knows that these things take time and that it's not beautiful all the time. But we're learning a lot, and in fact, we're learning so much about what it takes, and we're able to now help more districts. Castle publishes on our website for free lots of different resources for districts to use. I mentioned already the guides to help you pick different programs. We also have a new financial sustainability site that helps a district to plan an implementation of SEL. There's information there that allows them to build their knowledge, to learn from other districts, to plan an implementation, and to access resources. I'm going to actually just click on it for you so you can see what it looks like. So when you go on this website, you can see, if you go to Build Your Knowledge, there's lots of different articles and resources here to give you background information about SEL and SEL planning. If you go back to the district case studies, this is where you can actually see how other districts do it. And this is one of the most important pieces. We have 4 that we've highlighted here: Austin Independent School District, Chicago Public Schools, Washoe County, and Wheaton-Warrenville. And their information here. So from relatively smaller districts to 400,000 students. And what's interesting when you go to one of these is that you can actually get a sense of what is their budget for doing the work, and how did they do it. So on any of these sites, you can actually download a full case study which will outline their process. You can see a video, and you can even look at their budget. People always want to know, what does this cost to do the work? So all of this is available on the website, and is available for you to look at and share with your colleagues. This is all for free. One thing I did want to show you as we're wrapping up is this video from Chicago Public Schools, so that you can get a sense and you can hear from the students directly about what happened in their schools when they began implementing SEL and the changes that they saw. This is about 8 minutes, so we're going to watch this.
It says, I find my inner peace and let it carry me gently through the day. I want you to take a minute, okay? Turn and talk with your partner and tell me what this means. I really liked Adriana's expression. Can I share your expression, Adriana? Adriana was like going like this, like flying, right? Nice, nice.
We're teachers to educate their mind, but you also have to educate their heart and their soul. It all goes hand in hand. You can't teach appropriately without also addressing social and emotional skills of students with each other, with the teacher, and with themselves.
When I first got to Clemente 4 years ago, misconducts were through the roof. One of the ways in which they chose to deal with misconducts were in-school suspension, a lot of out-of-school suspension.
Suspension rates were out of control. We were suspending kids left and right, not worried about what was the background, what was the story, what happened, why did they feel that way. It happened, you're suspended. That's it, out the door.
We interviewed the entire staff. We did focus groups with kids. And the overwhelming response that we got, and it was said in different ways, was our students need to be cared for.
You can do it.
So we created a instructional approach first to help our teaching staff address social emotional learning inside the classroom. And how to embed it into curriculum. For example, if you're reading a text or you're looking at historical time periods, how does social emotional learning drive people's decision-making, characters' decisions, or how characters have behaved, or what happened in this time period that made people feel this particular way. And it gives kids a real platform to discuss how they feel about things in response to curriculum.
You walk around the school now, right? And not that it's perfect, no school is, but you can tell that there are relationships that exist between teachers, to teachers, between teachers and students with one another. And so what that allows for is a culture of calm.
Our misconducts in general over the past 4 years have decreased by over 75%. Our graduation rate exceeds that of the district. We last year had a 79% graduation rate. For the past 4 years, our freshman on track rate has been above 90%.
All right, Giovanni, you gonna help me? The story is called John Feels Lonely, and you're gonna help me. You're gonna help me show me, Julius, what John is feeling throughout the story, Ericar. Show me your lonely face again.
They're learning about feelings and how to understand and express their feelings whenever they need to. You know, whether it's positive feelings or uncomfortable feelings, they have that vocabulary as well.
Our assistant principal reported that two of the children, she heard him in a conversation, and one of them said to the other, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm not smart. And then the other student said, yes, you are. You know you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself.
We give compliments to each other daily. Students will sit, they're highlighted. They will sit on a stool, and all the students will go around and say a kind word about their peer. So that's what we do. It's like we're like a little family, a little community.
We have really discovered that there's a lot you can do with the existing structures and systems, so we really tried to integrate SEL with the goals of the district.
So I think it's important for them to know themselves socially and emotionally, and be able to regulate and really self-manage, and be able to pull apart from like a text what things are relatable to them and why characters do what they do based on their emotions.
Keynote just did two major things that he has never ever done before or even dreamed of doing in his life. What are those two things?
He just beat his wife.
He just beat his wife. For what? For what reason?
Because she wanted to smash the pearl.
Do you think that's possible that an actual object could have an evilness?
Well, actually, since they got the pearl, bad things have just been happening. So
yeah,
you could consider that evil.
That's a good point.
Well, you're speaking out your thoughts, but you're also speaking out your feelings. That's what I think SEL is for. Learning how to express your thoughts and feelings on a positive scale where it does not harm yourself or others.
The investment in personnel was not a lot, because personnel is not sustainable. It's really about developing the capacity of your teachers and your support staff to do peace circles or to do restorative chats, or how to give each other feedback on practices that we're seeing in the classroom. And so we've really given a lot of professional development to our teaching staff and our support staff, so that when funding goes away, we have the skills in-house to still support our students.
So I think we have seen a real way to make this work sustainable by doing that. At the same time, we've really leveraged grants to sort of take our work to the next level. So obviously, Castle and the Novo Foundation have supported really helping us think through systemically what does it look like to do SEL in a large urban district. We have other grants that are supporting restorative justice work, that are supporting some of our trauma-informed practice work, so that we can push our thinking, we can push our practice in ways that we may not have been able to do. Our CEO and our leaders in the district have really seen this as a priority and built it into our local budget, which is exciting. We've actually expanded in the last few years, even when budgetary times have been tough.
For me to improve myself as a student and throughout life, I think that social emotional learning will actually help you a lot. Mainly because you'll be able to connect with a lot of people. It'll make it easy for you to see different perspectives, and also being open-minded about it.
I think we live in a community where our young people just need to start with understanding their emotions, right? Because once they get an understanding of how they feel, they're at an advantage to figure out then how they're going to deal with those emotions and what decisions they're going to make and how that's going to impact their life.
You can't pursue the knowledge that you desire without learning the process to be open-minded.